Close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the weight of the day begin to lift from your shoulders, like a heavy cloak you have carried for too long. Let the tension in your jaw soften, your brow unfurrow. With each exhale, imagine the worries and the noises of your world dissolving, fading into a gentle, distant hum. You are here, now, in this quiet space, ready to drift, ready to listen. Our story tonight begins not with a hero or a dragon, but with a feeling you may know well. It is the feeling of a mind that will not quiet, a heart that feels a little too heavy, a soul that yearns for a simpler, more peaceful shore. It is the feeling of being adrift on a choppy sea, tossed by the waves of ambition, fear, desire, and regret. This was the feeling that clung to a young man named Elian. He lived in a city of marble and commerce, a place that buzzed with ceaseless energy. By day he worked as a scribe, his fingers stained with ink, his mind filled with the contracts, disputes, and boasts of other men. By night, his own thoughts would churn. He worried about his reputation, about earning enough to live comfortably, about the opinions of his peers. He fretted over news of distant wars, over the health of his aging parents, over things he had said yesterday, and things he must do tomorrow. His sleep was shallow, his peace was fleeting. He felt, in his quietest moments, that he was chasing a horizon that was always moving away from him. One sweltering afternoon, overwhelmed by the clamor of the marketplace and the weight of his own mind, Elian left the city walls behind him. He walked without a destination, following an old, dusty path that wound its way up into the gentle hills overlooking the sea. The air grew cooler here, scented with wild thyme and the salty tang of the breeze. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by the drowsy hum of bees and the rustle of olive leaves shimmering like silver coins in the sun. He walked for what felt like a long time, his mind slowly unspooling with each step. He passed ancient olive groves, their trunks gnarled and wise, and small vineyards clinging to the slopes. Eventually the path seemed to dissolve into the landscape, and he found himself before a simple stone wall, no taller than his shoulder. Over the top of the wall he could see the deep green canopy of fig trees and the bright blossoms of a pomegranate. There was no grand gate, only a modest, unlatched wooden door. A small, weathered plaque was affixed to it, and on it were carved a few simple words. "Stranger, here you will do well to tarry. Here our highest good is pleasure." Elian paused. Pleasure? His mind, so accustomed to the city's definition of the word, conjured images of lavish banquets, overflowing cups of wine, and decadent parties that lasted until dawn. It seemed a strange, almost scandalous invitation for such a tranquil-looking place. Was this some hidden villa belonging to a wealthy hedonist? Curiosity and a deep weariness of his own troubled thoughts urged him forward. He pushed the small wooden door, which swung open with a gentle creak. He stepped inside, and the world changed. He was not in a lavish courtyard, but in a garden. It was not meticulously manicured like the estates of the rich, but it was beautiful in its calm and gentle order. Gravel paths crunched softly under his sandals, winding between beds of fragrant herbs, vegetables, and flowers. A small, clear stream gurgled through the center of the garden, feeding a round, still pool where lily pads floated. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, mint, and sun-warmed earth. In the shade of a large fig tree, a few people sat on simple wooden benches, some reading, some talking in low, easy voices, their faces untroubled. An old man, with a kind, weathered face and a simple tunic, was tending to a bed of lettuces, his movements slow and deliberate. The garden was an island of profound peace. The very air seemed to vibrate with a quiet contentment that was utterly foreign to Elian. It was not the boisterous, fleeting happiness of a festival, but something deeper, more stable, like the cool, solid earth beneath his feet. The old man looked up from his lettuces, his eyes a clear, pale blue, and he smiled. It was not a smile of greeting for a customer or an acquaintance, but a smile of simple, genuine welcome. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice as soft as the rustling leaves. "You look weary. Come sit, there is fresh water from the spring." Elian, feeling suddenly shy and out of place, could only nod. He followed the old man to a stone bench near the trickling stream. The man filled a simple clay cup from an urn and handed it to him. The water was cool and pure, and as Elian drank, he felt as though he were washing away some of the dust not just from the road, but from his soul. "My name is Lycomedes," the old man said, sitting beside him, "and this is the garden." "I am Elian," he replied. "I saw the sign on your door. It speaks of pleasure as the highest good. I confess I do not understand. This place, it is so peaceful. It does not seem like a place of hedonism." Lycomedes chuckled, a warm, gentle sound. "Ah, the great misunderstanding. It follows us like a shadow. Tell me, Elian, when you think of pleasure, what comes to your mind?" Elian thought of the city. "Feasts," he said. "Expensive wine. Music and dancing. The thrill of winning a wager, or the praise of an important man." "These are indeed pleasures," Lycomedes agreed, nodding. "They are like fireworks in the night sky. A brilliant flash, a moment of awe, and then darkness. They are exciting, but they are fleeting, and often they leave you wanting more, or even worse, they come with a price. The feast leads to an aching stomach, the expensive wine to a heavy head. The praise of an important man creates a fear of his future disapproval." He gestured around the garden with a sweep of his hand. "The pleasure we seek here is of a different kind. It is not a firework, but the quiet, steady light of the stars. It is not the thrill of the storm, but the deep, profound calm of the sea after the winds have died down. We do not seek to add intense joys, but to remove all sources of pain, anxiety, and fear. For what is pleasure, in its purest form, but the absence of pain?" Elian looked at the old man, and then at the tranquil scene around him. The people conversing softly, the gentle drone of the bees, the cool shade of the tree. He felt the truth of the words settle in him, though he did not fully grasp it yet. "The highest pleasure," Lycomedes continued, his voice a soothing balm, "is a state we call ataraxias. It means tranquility, untroubledness. It is the state of a mind free from disturbance and a body free from pain. It is the quiet joy of simply being, without the constant pull of fear or the nagging ache of unfulfilled desire. This, stranger, is the pleasure we cultivate in this garden, and it is a pleasure available to all." Elian looked down at his own hands, his scribe's hands, which were clenched into tight fists in his lap. He hadn't even realized. He consciously uncurled his fingers and took a slow, deep breath of the fragrant air. For the first time all day, he felt a tiny seed of peace begin to sprout in the barren soil of his mind. "Stay a while, Elian," Lycomedes said softly. "Rest, listen. There is much the quiet of the garden can teach a troubled heart." And so, as the sun began its slow descent towards the shimmering sea, casting long, peaceful shadows across the ground, Elian stayed. He found a quiet spot on the grass, leaned his back against the warm trunk of an ancient olive tree, and closed his eyes, ready to listen not just with his ears, but with his whole being. The gentle voice of Lycomedes became the current on which his mind could finally, truly, begin to drift. "Let us first speak of desire," Lycomedes began, his voice weaving through the evening air like a gentle melody, "for it is the nature of our desires that so often determines the nature of our peace. In the city you are taught to want more, a bigger house, a finer robe, a more important title, a more beautiful companion. The merchants create new things for you to covet, and the poets sing of grand passions that shake the soul. We are taught that happiness lies at the top of a tall ladder of acquisitions and achievements. But think of it this way, Elian. Imagine a man who is desperately thirsty. You give him a cup of water. The pleasure he feels in that moment is immense, is it not? It is the simple, powerful pleasure of satisfying a true need. Now, imagine a man who is not thirsty, and you offer him the most exotic, spiced wine from a golden goblet. He may drink it, and he may find it pleasant, but the pleasure is a lesser thing. It is an addition, not a fulfillment. And if he drinks too much of it, it will soon become a source of pain. Epicurus, the man who first planted a garden like this one, taught us to look at our desires and sort them, as a gardener sorts his seeds. He saw that they fall into three simple categories. First, there are the desires that are * natural and necessary. These are the desires rooted in our very nature, the ones we cannot ignore without causing ourselves real pain. The desire for food when we are hungry, the desire for water when we are thirsty, the desire for shelter from the cold and the rain, the desire for a simple blanket when we are tired. These desires are the friends of a peaceful life. They are easy to satisfy: a piece of bread, a cup of water, a simple roof over our head. And the pleasure that comes from satisfying them is pure and deep. It is the pleasure of returning to a state of balance, of contentment. The body is at ease, and so the mind can be at ease. In the garden, we find immense joy in a simple meal of bread, cheese, olives, and fresh water, for we know we are satisfying a true and honest need. Next, Lycomedes continued, picking up a smooth gray stone from the path and turning it over in his palm. There are the desires that are natural but not necessary. These are desires that are also rooted in our nature, but are variations and elaborations on the necessary ones. You are hungry, so you need food. But do you need a whole roasted peacock stuffed with figs and spices? No, that is a natural desire for food, but an unnecessary elaboration. You are cold, so you need clothing. But do you need a whole robe dyed with the most expensive Tyrian purple and embroidered with gold thread? No, these things can bring pleasure, it is true. A fine meal is enjoyable. A beautiful garment is pleasing to the eye. But they are not essential for happiness, and chasing them often brings more trouble than it is worth. The fancy meal requires great expense and effort, and can lead to indigestion. The expensive robe makes you a target for envy and thieves, and fills you with anxiety about it getting torn or stained. These desires are not our enemies, but they are fickle friends. We can enjoy them if they come to us easily, without struggle or anxiety, but we must never, ever pin our happiness upon them. We must be able to be just as happy with bread and water as we are with a feast, just as content in a simple tunic as in a silken robe. And finally, he said, his voice lowering slightly, we come to the most dangerous category. These are the desires that are vain and empty. They are neither natural nor necessary. They are not born from the body's needs, but from the false beliefs of society and the chatter of the crowd. The desire for great wealth, not for what it can buy in terms of comfort, but for the sake of being wealthy. The desire for fame, for your name to be on the lips of strangers. The desire for political power, to command others and shape nations. The desire for immortality through grand statues and monuments. These desires, Elian, are like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. There is no end to them. The man who desires wealth will never feel he has enough. The man who desires fame will always be anxious about his reputation and the opinions of others. The man who desires power will live in constant fear of his rivals. These desires are the chief architects of a troubled mind. They are the winds that whip the sea of the soul into a frenzy. They promise happiness but deliver only anxiety, fear, and a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. The secret to tranquility, then, is not to get everything you want, but to want only what you truly need. It is a process of simplifying, of letting go. When you focus your life on satisfying the natural and necessary desires, you find that happiness is not so difficult to achieve. A roof, a friend, a piece of bread, a moment of quiet contemplation, these are the true riches. Everything else is decoration, sometimes lovely but never essential. Look around you, Lycomedes gestured to the garden again. We grow our own food, we draw our own water, we have shelter. But most importantly, we have each other. This leads us to the greatest of all the natural and necessary goods, the one that provides the most security and the most profound joy, friendship. As he spoke, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky bloomed into soft shades of rose and violet. A woman with a gentle face began to light simple clay lamps, placing them along the paths. Their warm, flickering glow created small pools of light in the deepening twilight. The soft notes of a lyre began to drift from another corner of the garden, a simple, haunting melody. The people who had been reading and talking began to gather in the center of the garden, near a long wooden table. The smell of baking bread and warm vegetable stew began to fill the air. Friendship, Lycomedes said, his voice filled with a deep warmth. Of all the things which wisdom provides to make life entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship. A wise man knows that he is a fragile creature. Sickness can come, misfortune can strike, age will surely advance. To face these things alone is a source of great fear, but to face them with friends, that is the greatest security we can ever know. Friendship is not a transaction, as it so often is in the city. It is not about what another person can do for you, or how they can advance your status. True friendship is born of trust and affection. It is the quiet comfort of knowing that there are people who care for your well-being as much as their own. It is sharing a simple meal and finding more pleasure in the conversation than in the food itself. It is the ability to be silent with someone without feeling awkward. It is the knowledge that if you fall, there will be hands to help you up. Here in the garden, we live as a community of friends. We share the work, we share our meals, and we share our thoughts. We study, we talk, we support one another. This web of affection is a stronger fortress against the pains of life than any city wall, and a greater treasure than any king's vault. Fame, power, wealth, these things can be taken from you in an instant, but the love of true friends is a possession that enriches the soul and can weather any storm. So you see, Elian, he concluded, as they rose to join the others at the table, the pleasure we seek is not a solitary indulgence, it is a shared peace. It is the deep, abiding contentment that comes from a life lived simply, with desires moderated and a heart surrounded by the warmth of friendship. Elian sat at the long wooden table. He was given a bowl of the warm, savory stew, a thick slice of hearty bread, and a cup of cool water. The food was simple, yet it tasted more delicious than any of the complicated dishes he had eaten at city banquets. It was because he was truly hungry, and because he was eating it in a place of such profound peace. He listened to the quiet conversations around him. They were not about business or politics or gossip. A woman was describing a particularly beautiful cloud she had seen that afternoon. A man was talking about a passage he had read in a scroll about the patterns of the stars. They spoke with a gentle respect for one another, listening as much as they talked. And Elian realized that for the first time in as long as he could remember, his own mind was quiet. He wasn't worrying about tomorrow. He wasn't regretting yesterday. He was simply there, at a table with new friends, under a sky full of emerging stars, enjoying the simple, perfect pleasure of a warm meal and a peaceful heart. This, he began to understand, was ataraxia. After the simple meal was finished and the dishes were cleared away, the small community of the garden settled into the cool of the evening. The moon, a perfect silver disk, had risen over the dark hills, and its gentle light bathed the garden in a soft, ethereal glow. The air was still and quiet, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant, rhythmic sigh of the sea. Elian sat with Lycomedes on the stone steps of a small, open-air pavilion that housed a collection of scrolls. The faint scent of papyrus mingled with the night-blooming jasmine that climbed the columns. "Your mind is quieter now," Lycomedes observed, not as a question but as a statement. "It is," Elian admitted, a sense of wonder in his voice. "But I find a new question arising in the quiet. In the city we are taught to fear the gods. We make sacrifices to appease our anger, we pray for their favor. We live with a sense of being watched, of being judged. If we displease them, we are told, they will send storms, or plagues, or misfortune. This fear is a constant shadow. How can one be tranquil while living under the gaze of such powerful and capricious beings?" Lycomedes looked up at the vast, star-dusted sky. "Look up, Elian. What do you see?" "The moon, the stars, a sky of infinite depth." "And what do? They shine. They move in their silent, perfect courses. They are beautiful and distant." "Exactly," Lycomedes said. "They are beautiful, and they are distant, and they are untroubled. Now consider the nature of that which is divine. What must a god be? A god, by definition, must be a perfect being, a being of supreme happiness and blessedness. And what is the state of a perfectly happy and blessed being? It is a state of the atoinsia, a state of perfect tranquility, free from all disturbance." He paused, letting the idea settle. "Now, think about the lives of mortals. We are full of turmoil. We struggle, we suffer, we worry, we grieve. To manage our affairs, to punish one person and reward another, to stir up a storm here and cause an earthquake there, what would that require? It would require effort, concern, anger, vexation. It would require a being to be deeply troubled by the goings-on of the world. But to be troubled is to be imperfect. It is to lack tranquility. And a being that lacks tranquility cannot be a god. It is a contradiction in terms. Elian felt a profound shift in his understanding, like a locked door creaking open in his mind. So the gods, he began, they do not care about us. There was a hint of old fear in his voice, the fear of being abandoned. It is not that they do not care, in the way a parent worries for a child, Lycomedes corrected gently. It is that their nature is one of perfection and peace, and our world of turmoil is not their concern. They exist in their own state of blessedness, like the distant stars. They are not angry with you, Elian. They do not demand your sacrifices or your fearful prayers. They are not watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. They are the ultimate models of the very tranquility we seek. We should not fear them. We should emulate their self-sufficiency and their perfect calm. To think of the gods is to think of a state of eternal, untroubled bliss. This thought should not bring you fear, but inspiration. The shadow of divine wrath that had loomed over Elian's life began to recede, to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The world suddenly felt less like a stage upon which he was a fearful actor, and more like a home, vast and indifferent, in which he was free to create his own peace. But if the fear of the gods is one great shadow, Elian said, his voice barely a whisper, there is another, even greater, the fear of death. It is the final terror, the end of everything. How can a person ever be truly at peace, knowing that this abyss awaits? Lycomedes was silent for a long moment, his gaze still fixed on the heavens. When he spoke, his voice was softer than ever, as if sharing the most profound and simple secret in the universe. "Tell me, Elian," he said, "do you remember the time before you were born?" Elian frowned in concentration. "No, of course not. There is nothing to remember. It was nothingness." "Was it painful? Were you afraid? Did you suffer in that nothingness?" "No," Elian said slowly. "There was no me to feel pain or fear." "Precisely," Lycomedes affirmed. "And so it will be with death. Epicurus taught us the simplest and most liberating of truths. Death is nothing to us. Asterisk. For when we exist, death is not here. And when death is here, we do not exist. You and death will never meet. You fear an encounter that is, by its very nature, impossible." He picked up a dry leaf that had fallen onto the steps. It was brittle and brown, its life over. "Where is the leaf that was green and full of sap yesterday? It is gone. The atoms that composed it have not been destroyed. They have simply dispersed, ready to form something new, a bit of soil, a particle of dust, a nutrient for a new root. The leaf itself does not suffer in its non-existence. It simply is not. We are all made of atoms," he continued, his voice taking on a lulling rhythmic quality. "Tiny, invisible particles moving through the void. They come together for a time to form you, Elian. Your thoughts, your feelings, your body. It is a temporary arrangement, a beautiful, complex dance. When you die, the dance ends. The atoms that were you will separate and go on to other things. You that is the consciousness born of that specific arrangement will cease. There will be no dark underworld of punishment, no shadowy realm of regret. There will be only what there was before you were born, a peaceful, senseless void. People fear death because they imagine they will be there to experience it. They imagine themselves as a cold corpse, aware of the darkness, missing the sunlight, mourning their own passing. But this is a trick of the mind. You will not be there to miss the sun. You will not be there to feel the cold. There will be no you to experience anything at all. Therefore, death is not an evil to be feared. It is simply the end of sensation, the end of consciousness. It is a release from all pain and all anxiety, forever. To live a full and happy life, you must remove this fear from your heart. Do not waste the precious moments of your existence dreading its end. That is like refusing to eat a delicious meal because you know the plate will eventually be empty. The meal is no less delicious for its finitude. In fact, knowing that it is finite might even make you savor each bite more fully. Live now. Find your joy now. Cultivate your tranquility now. Fill your life with friendship and simple pleasures. When the time comes for your atoms to disperse, let them do so from a being that lived well and wisely, without the pointless burden of fearing a state you will never experience. Lycomedes gently crumbled the dry leaf in his hand, and a fine dust drifted away into the moonlight, invisible. Elian watched it go. He thought of the eternity before his birth, a vast, silent ocean of time, where he had felt no pain. And he imagined the eternity after his death, another ocean, just as silent, just as painless. His life was a small, precious island between these two great seas. The fear that had been a cold knot in his stomach for his entire life began to loosen. Death was not a monster hiding in the shadows. It was simply the closing of a door, the end of the story. And the quality of the story was what mattered, not the fact that it had an end. He took a deep breath. The night air felt clean and cool in his lungs. The world, stripped of the fear of gods and the fear of death, seemed a much simpler, much freer place. It was a place where one could simply live and seek peace, without the terror of divine punishment or the dread of an eternal abyss. He felt lighter than he had in years. The stars above did not seem like the eyes of judging gods, but like a silent, beautiful testament to the vast and wondrous nature of the universe, a universe of which he was a small, temporary, but beautiful part. The next morning, Elian awoke not to the familiar jolt of anxiety, but to the gentle sound of birdsong and the soft light of dawn filtering through the leaves outside the simple guest hut where he had slept. For a moment he lay still, marveling at the absence of the usual mental clutter. There was no immediate cascade of worries, no mental list of tasks and obligations. There was only the present moment, the cool air, the comfortable cot, the feeling of being well rested. He rose and walked out into the garden. The air was fresh and dewy, and the early morning sun cast everything in a soft, golden light. He saw Lycomedes already at work, not with the grim determination of a laborer, but with the quiet focus of an artist, tending to a vine of climbing roses. "Good morning, Elian," the old man said with his customary smile. "Sleep brings good counsel, does it not?" "It does," Elian agreed. "Lycomedes, yesterday you spoke of us being made of atoms, and how this understanding can free us from fear. I would like to understand more. It seems a strange thought. How can all this," he gestured to the vibrant, living garden, "be nothing more than tiny, invisible particles?" Lycomedes straightened up, wiping his earthy hands on his tunic. "It is not a thought to diminish the world, but to understand it. To see the world as it truly is, without the need for superstition or myth, is a powerful tool for achieving tranquility. Fear thrives in ignorance. When you do not understand why the thunder rolls or the lightning flashes, you invent angry gods to explain it. When you do not understand the nature of disease, you imagine it as a divine punishment. But when you seek to understand the world through reason and observation, through what we call physics, you replace fear with wonder." He begged Elian to follow him to the still, clear pool in the center of the garden. A ray of sunlight pierced the canopy of a nearby tree, and in that beam 1,000 tiny dust motes danced and swirled. "Look," Lycomedes said, pointing to the sunbeam. "Imagine that those motes of dust are atoms. They are the fundamental building blocks of everything. They are eternal, indestructible. They cannot be created or destroyed. They have always existed and will always exist. And they are in constant motion, moving through the empty space, the void." "Everything?" Elian asked. "The stones, the water, the trees? Me?" "Everything," Lycomedes affirmed. "The atoms that make up this stone are packed together tightly, vibrating in place. The atoms that make up the water flow more freely, sliding past one another. The atoms that make up the air you breathe are farther apart still, moving rapidly through space. And the atoms that make up you, Elian, are in a constant, complex exchange with the world around you. With every breath, you take in atoms from the air. With every sip of water, you take in atoms from the stream. They become part of you for a time, and then you release them back into the world. You are not a fixed, solid thing. You are a flowing river of atoms, a temporary pattern in the eternal dance of matter. Elian stared at his own hand, trying to imagine it not as solid flesh, but as a swirling constellation of countless, tiny, ancient particles. But if everything is just atoms moving according to fixed laws, Elian said, a new question forming, then where is our freedom? If my thoughts and actions are just the result of atoms colliding in my brain, am I not just a machine? How can I choose to live a tranquil life if my path is already determined? Lycomedes smiled. This was a deep and important question. This is the most subtle and beautiful part of the teaching. Epicurus reasoned that if the atoms only ever moved in straight lines, or collided in perfectly predictable ways, then yes, everything would be predetermined. The universe would be a great machine, and we would be mere cogs within it. But he proposed something remarkable. He said that occasionally, for no reason at all, at no fixed time or place, an atom will swerve ever so slightly in its path. He took a small pebble and dropped it into the still pool. It fell straight down, sending out perfect, concentric ripples. That is determined motion, he said. Then he tossed another pebble, giving it a slight spin. It wobbled and veered as it sank, creating a more complex, unpredictable pattern of ripples. That is the swerve. This tiny, unpredictable swerve, he continued, is the source of all novelty in the universe. It is what allows atoms to break from their determined paths and form new combinations, creating the complexity we see all around us. And in us, in our minds, this swerve is the physical basis of our free will. It is the crack in the machinery of determinism through which our volition can act. It means that your choices are real, Elian. You are not a puppet. You can observe your desires, you can analyze your fears, and you can choose to change your path. You can choose to turn away from the vain and empty desires and towards the simple and natural ones. The universe gives us both the material to exist and the freedom to shape that existence. This idea was both humbling and empowering. To be a part of the same fundamental substance as the stars and the stones, yet to possess a spark of genuine freedom within that substance. It was a profound thought. It meant that the world was not a chaotic, meaningless place ruled by supernatural whims, nor was it a rigid prison of fate. It was a rational, understandable system in which he had the genuine capacity to seek his own happiness. This understanding, Lycomedes said, his voice becoming gentle again, is the foundation upon which we build our ethics, our way of life, because if there are no gods to reward or punish us, and no afterlife to fear, then the consequences of our actions are felt right here, in this life. This leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, living a virtuous life. Virtue? Elian asked. Like justice and honor and courage? The philosophers in the city speak of these things as duties, as difficult obligations we must perform for the good of the state or to please the gods. We see it differently, Lycomedes explained. We do not pursue virtue because it is a stern duty, or because we seek a reward in the afterlife. We pursue virtue for a much simpler and more practical reason, because it is impossible to live pleasantly without living wisely, honorably, and justly, and it is impossible to live wisely, honorably, and justly without living pleasantly. The two are intertwined. Consider justice, he said. The man who steals, or lies, or harms others may gain some temporary advantage. But what else does he gain? He gains the constant fear of being discovered. He must always be looking over his shoulder. He is suspicious of others, imagining they are as dishonest as he is. He lives in a state of internal turmoil. His crime has imprisoned him in a cage of anxiety. The just man, on the other hand, has nothing to hide. His conscience is clear. He does not fear the law or the judgment of his neighbors. He lives in a state of inner peace. Therefore, we are just not for the sake of others, but for the sake of our own tranquility. Consider prudence, he went on. The prudent man is the one who can calculate the consequences of his actions. He understands that a night of heavy drinking will be paid for with a day of sickness. He knows that a moment of angry words can destroy a friendship that took years to build. He chooses the path that leads to a stable, long-term pleasure, rather than a fleeting, intense pleasure that is followed by a greater pain. Prudence is the art of navigating life in a way that maximizes peace and minimizes distress. and consider honor and courage. Not the reckless courage of the soldier seeking glory in battle, that is often a vain and empty pursuit, but the quiet courage to live according to your own principles, even when the crowd disagrees. The courage to face misfortune with a calm mind. The courage to live simply in a world that screams for you to want more. This kind of courage is essential for a tranquil life. So you see, Elian, these virtues are not external rules imposed upon us. They are the very tools we use to build a happy life. They are the principles of mental health. A life of injustice, foolishness, and cowardice is, by its very nature, a life filled with fear, anxiety, and regret. A life of justice, prudence, and courage is a life of peace, confidence, and contentment. We choose virtue not because we are supposed to, but because it is the only intelligent path to the pleasure we seek. Elian spent the rest of the day in quiet contemplation, absorbing these ideas. He helped with the simple tasks of the garden, weeding a patch of herbs, carrying water from the spring, helping to knead the dough for the evening's bread. With each task, he focused on the physical sensations, the feeling of the cool earth, the weight of the water jug, the soft texture of the dough. He was not working to impress anyone or to earn a wage. He was simply participating in the life of the community, contributing to the satisfaction of their natural and necessary needs. He watched the others in the garden. He saw the deep, easy affection between them. He saw their lack of pretense, their genuine kindness. They were living these principles. Their tranquility was not an accident. It was the result of a carefully chosen philosophy, a gentle and deliberate art of living. That evening, as they sat down for their meal, Elian looked at the faces around the table, illuminated by the warm lamplight. He looked at Lycomedes, his face a map of peaceful wisdom. He looked at the simple food on the table, the product of their own hands. He listened to the gentle conversation, the sound of the lyre, the crickets in the darkness beyond their circle of light, and a profound feeling washed over him. It was a feeling of deep and utter peace. The choppy sea of his mind had become a still, clear lake. His anxieties about his reputation, his future, the gods, and death had receded, their power broken by the simple, clear light of reason. He was here, now, in this moment. And this moment was good. It was enough. He felt no need for more. He was not hungry or thirsty. He was warm. He was safe. He was among friends. Every natural and necessary desire was met. And in the absence of pain, in the absence of fear, in the absence of nagging want, he discovered the truest pleasure, ataraxia. He had found the shore he had been searching for. It was not a distant, exotic island, but a quiet garden he could build within his own mind. Elian stayed in the garden for many more days, which turned into weeks. He did not count them. The rhythm of life there was governed not by the calendar, but by the sun and the seasons. He fell into its gentle cadence, rising with the dawn, working in the cool of the morning, reading and conversing in the heat of the afternoon, sharing a meal at dusk, and contemplating the stars at night. He learned not just from Lycomedes' words, but from the silent example of everyone who lived there. He learned patience from watching an old woman named Thea painstakingly weave a basket from reeds, her movements unhurried and precise. He learned the joy of creation from a young man named Philon, who carved exquisite wooden flutes and filled the evenings with soft, melancholic music that seemed to speak of the beauty of transient things. He learned the deep pleasure of shared knowledge from studying scrolls with a quiet scholar who would light up with joy when explaining a complex passage about the motion of the planets. His life, which had once been a frantic race, became a slow, mindful walk. He began to notice things he had never seen before. The intricate pattern of a spider's web glistening with dew, the way the light changed on the surface of the olive leaves throughout the day, the subtle difference in the taste of water from the spring versus water from the well. His senses, no longer dulled by the constant noise of anxiety, came alive. One afternoon he was sitting with Lycomedes by the reflecting pool. The water was perfectly still, mirroring the deep blue of the sky and the white clouds drifting by. "The mind is like this pool, Elian," Lycomedes said softly. "When it is agitated by the winds of fear and false desire, it is murky and disturbed. You cannot see the sky in it. You cannot see your own reflection clearly. But when the winds die down, when the mind is calm and still, it reflects the world as it truly is, and in that clarity you find peace." Elian nodded, understanding completely. I feel it, he said, the stillness. But like Lycomedes, I cannot stay in this garden forever. I have a life in the city, parents who depend on me, responsibilities. How can I keep this peace when I return to that world of noise and ambition? This is the most important part of the journey, Lycomedes replied, his gaze kind and steady. The garden is not a place to hide from the world forever. It is a place to learn how to live in the world. You do not carry the garden with you by bringing its soil or its water. You carry it within you. It becomes the architecture of your mind. When you are back in the city, he continued, you will be surrounded by people chasing vain and empty desires. They will speak of wealth and fame as the greatest goods. Do not judge them and do not argue with them. Simply remember what you have learned here. Remember the 3 kinds of desires. When you feel the pull of envy for a rich man's villa, ask yourself, is this a desire that is natural and necessary? The answer will be no. And in that simple act of questioning, the desire will lose its power over you. When you hear people speak of the angry gods or the terrors of the afterlife, you will feel no fear, for you understand the nature of things. You know that the gods are tranquil, and that death is nothing to you. This knowledge is a shield that no superstition can penetrate. When you are faced with a difficult choice, you will not act on impulse or emotion. You will practice prudence. You will calmly weigh the consequences, choosing the path that leads to long-term tranquility over short-term gratification. And most importantly, he stressed, seek out friends, not business associates or fair-weather companions, but true friends. Find a few people with whom you can speak honestly, with whom you can share simple pleasures. A small circle of trusted friends in the middle of a bustling city is a garden of its own. It will be your fortress and your sanctuary. Do not withdraw from life, Lycomedes said. Live it, but live it wisely. Find joy in your work as a scribe, not for the praise it might bring, but for the simple pleasure of doing a task well. Enjoy your meals, savoring the taste of the bread and the wine without needing them to be extravagant. Love your parents not out of duty, but for the genuine affection you share. Live justly and honorably, not for reward, but for the peace of mind it brings. The goal is not to be unfeeling, like a statue. It is to be like this pool of water. The world will still happen. A breeze may ripple the surface. A stone may be tossed in. But because your mind has depth and stillness, the disturbances will be temporary. They will pass, and you will return to your natural state of clear, calm reflection. This is the art of living. This is the gift of philosophy. The day came when Elian knew it was time to leave. There was no sadness in it, only a quiet sense of gratitude and readiness. He went to say goodbye to Lycomedes, who was, as on the first day, tending his lettuces. The old man looked up and smiled. So, you are ready to carry the garden into the world. I am, Elian said. I don't have the words to thank you. The thanks is in the living of it, Lycomedes replied. He handed Elian a small, smooth, gray stone from the path, the same kind he had held when explaining the desires. A reminder, he said simply. When the world feels overwhelming, hold this in your hand. Feel its coolness, its solidity. Remember the simple, solid truths upon which you can build a peaceful life. Elian took the stone. It felt cool and comforting in his palm. He said his goodbyes to the other members of the community, who wished him well with a warmth that was free of any clinging sentimentality. They were friends, and they knew his happiness was in his own hands now. He walked to the small wooden gate and paused, turning back for one last look at the garden. It was just as he had first seen it, an oasis of gentle order and profound peace, bathed in the warm afternoon light. It was, he now knew, a living embodiment of a beautiful idea, that happiness is not a prize to be won, but a state of balance to be cultivated. He stepped through the gate, closing it softly behind him. The path back to the city seemed different now. He noticed the scent of the thyme more keenly. He felt the warmth of the sun on his skin, not as a burden, but as a simple, pleasant sensation. The distant sound of the city, when it finally reached his ears, was no longer a source of anxiety, but simply a sound, a part of the world. He entered the city walls. The noise, the crowds, The frantic energy were all the same. But he was different. He walked through the marketplace, and for the first time he saw it not as a place of temptation and competition, but with a kind of gentle detachment. He saw the merchants shouting, the customers haggling, the politicians posturing, and he felt not a desire to join their frantic dance, but a quiet compassion for the turmoil they were causing themselves. He returned to his small room. It was plain, but it was shelter. He had bread, cheese, and an olive in his cupboard. It was food. That evening he did not fret about the next day. He sat by his window, holding the smooth gray stone, and watched the moon rise over the rooftops. He felt the peace of the garden settle over him, a quiet, steady presence in his own heart. He knew life would still have its challenges, its pains, and its difficulties. But he no longer feared them. He had the tools, he had the understanding, he had the memory of a quiet garden, and the knowledge of how to build one within himself. And as you lie here now on the edge of sleep, you can carry that garden with you too. Let the gentle wisdom of this place be a balm for your own mind. Breathe in and breathe out. Remember the simple pleasures, the feeling of clean sheets, the coolness of the water you drink, the comfort of your bed. These are the natural and necessary things, the foundations of a contented life. Let go of the need for more. Tonight you have all that you need. Remember your friends. Think of the people you love, the ones who bring you comfort and joy. Feel the warmth of that affection in your heart. This is your greatest treasure, your strongest fortress. Rest in the security of that love. Let go of your fears. The universe is a vast and wondrous dance of atoms. The gods, if they exist, are in a state of perfect bliss and are not troubled by you. They are models of tranquility, not sources of fear. And death is nothing to you. It is a peaceful sleep from which you will not wake. It is not an enemy to be fought, but a natural end to be accepted without dread. Let the fear of it dissolve, leaving only the precious, peaceful present. Live virtuously in your heart. Let go of any anger, any resentment, any guilt. Forgive yourself and others, not for their sake, but for your own peace. A clear conscience is the softest pillow. Your mind is a quiet pool. Let the ripples of the day's events grow still. Let the water become clear. Reflect the quiet darkness around you, the gentle silence. There is nothing to do right now, nothing to solve. Nowhere to be but right here, drifting peacefully. Carry the garden within you as you drift into sleep. Let its peace be your peace. Let its tranquility be your own. The world will be there tomorrow, but for now, you are in a safe and quiet harbor, your anchor dropped deep in the calm waters of a peaceful mind. Sleep now, sleep deeply, sleep in peace.